Good evening and welcome to Education in Columbus, a radio or Urban One virtual town hall meeting. I'm DJ Mr. King of Power 1075 1063, and I will be joined by Ms. Stephanie Hightower, who is the president and CEO of the Columbus Urban League. How you doing?
I'm good, DJ Mr. King, and I look forward to this opportunity to share the screen with you tonight.
Absolutely. Now, we know that these are some challenging times for parents, kids, and schools, from administrators to teachers to the cleaning staff, the food service staff. COVID-19 just keeps erasing how the rules are delivered about education to our children. Now, for instance, I know school districts like Columbus City initially hoped to kind of do a blended options for families this fall, but with the spike of COVID-19 cases, has made many health experts and educators kind of rethink their plans. CCS just announced that all grades will be online for the first quarter this school year. So these decisions, they have enormous impacts on our families here in Central Ohio. You know, when you think about questions like, what do parents do if they have to go to work and their children are at home? On the other hand, what if there really isn't a safe way to send students back to school? How can we ensure that students are really learning online? You know, how do they get food, breakfast, lunch, etc.? So, you know, we see these impacts, and of course they affect our Black and brown kids at an insurmountable level, even when school is in session. So that's why we're here today. We're here today to talk about the X, Y's, and Z's of education more than the ABCs of it. And fortunately for us, we have some great panelists this evening who can offer a lot of insight of how we can handle some of these things. So I want to bring some of our first guests up, introduce them. We have Ms. Noelle Arnold. She's the Associate Dean, Equity of Diversity and Global Engagement at The Ohio State University College of Education and Human Ecology. How you doing, Ms. Arnold?
Doing well, thank you.
Nice to have you. Thank you for joining us. We also have Ms. Alicia Gillison. She is the Chief Engagement Officer for Columbus City Schools. How you doing?
I am well. How are you, DJ Mr. King?
Thank you for joining us tonight. And then we also have in this session Dr. Mashika Roberts of the Columbus Public Health. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you this evening?
Pretty good, pretty good.
So, you know, we wanted to, the reason why we thought this first segment was important is to talk about not only the health and safety of our children and our families and our teachers and all of those wonderful people who work in our school districts, but we also need to also talk about, what kind of impact this is going to have on our children. We know that especially in some of our urban school districts, that we have children who need to have structured learning environments. Mm-hmm. I just had an email earlier today from one of our neighborhood foundations who people are just worried, Alicia and Dr. Roberts and Noelle, about what's going to happen these first 3 months when our young people, when our babies are not in a structured environment and at school, and what DJ Mr. King said as well. We always know that African Americans, unfortunately, most of us are at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to going and having jobs. At the Urban League, we say, Black folks are the last ones hired and the first ones fired. And so, we're talking about people who don't have the same flexibility as many of us to not be able to go to work or to stay at home. And so what do we say to those parents who are now having to look at alternative options for their children in order to go through the next, quarter with their learning? So that's where we wanted to start off today. And so, Dr. Arnold, if you could give us some insights for our parents and our listening audience about what does this mean to have children not in school?
So thank you, DJ Mr. King, and thank you, President Hightower, for having me today. To answer that question, I want to draw on some of my work with schools and districts after 2 natural disasters. And one of those lessons is that schools and districts are often dealing with a myriad of concerns other than just the crisis itself. And sometimes they're dealing with more than one crisis. So right now we're dealing with COVID and systemic racism that both are impacting schooling. Some urban districts have more to deal with than just the crisis itself. Another thing I'd like to add is that there's something I'd like to call a crisis continuum of recovery. And this means that there are stages in this continuum, and not everybody, whether it's students, teachers, families, they're on different stages of this recovery continuum. I'd also say that, districts might want to keep it simple. There's a huge curve for everybody, plus the fact that we're still in the middle of these crises. They're not over. And I think the public and policymakers have to allow districts to try out solutions, even make missteps if they might, as they seek to best serve students and families.
Thank you, Dr. Arnold. So, just based upon your research, what advice would you give to parents, about what do we need to do during this, these unprecedented times?
Yeah, so I think I could offer many different strategies, but I think sometimes strategies that we offer to parents assume that everybody is able to walk out those strategies or to do those strategies. We certainly know that parents and families have different circumstances. So certainly I would say to try to maintain a routine for students and children. Also, another that we've been working with some communities right now is working with families to try to think about sharing the load or getting with other parents to talk about how to best serve students. But mostly what I would say, just from my work after even Katrina, is having parents to observe any patterns in their own families for the first 2 to 4 weeks. What kinds of things work best for them? When is their child best learning? When is the best time even for parents to help their students? And certainly to not be afraid to reach out to districts or the teacher once you kind of get a handle on what those patterns are for your family, and see if you can work up a plan with the teacher or with the school outside of maybe the schedule that schools have provided that best serve your family.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep it real quick because this is what we do at the Urban League. All right, so we know that urban families sometimes don't have the resources. I'm really excited about today. The Columbus Foundation is now putting a fund in place to create broadband opportunities for our young people. I don't have a computer. I work the 3rd and 4th shift. I don't have a babysitter. I don't have patterns. I need to figure out how my babies are going to eat because they usually eat breakfast and lunch and possibly a snack at school. I hear you, but if I am a parent that is dealing with all of these challenging issues that are going on, what are you going to say to me? What are those? I hear you, but is that really what we're talking about going to be helped? Because I don't have a pattern and I don't have a babysitter and I don't have food. So how do what tips do we give to those folks who are going to be frustrated? And maybe it's more just hope and encouragement. I don't know.
Sure. Absolutely. And that's why I always kind of shy away from a list of to do or a list of things that I suggest parents to do. I think the most basic of things is whether it's a pattern or lack thereof, actually being in touch with the district, actually being in touch with the child's teacher about things that work best for your family. A lot of times I know in districts and when we're making policy, we often don't talk to the people who are actually being affected by the things that are happening. And so that's why I said the most important thing, I think, is for families to think about and observe what works best for them, and then taking those needs to the district and to their child's teacher. Totally agree with you.
I want to switch over to and ask Ms. Gillison. Now you've with Columbus City Schools, you've been kind of leading the charge on whether to decide to operate this fall or not. what's that process been like, and like what was some of the questions and things that you looked at in terms of, deciding to go all virtual, or not bring the kids back? What was that process like?
Thank you for that question, Mr. DJ King. First, I want to start off by saying President Hightower, on behalf of Columbus City Schools Superintendent, Dr. Talisa Dixon, and our more than 50,000 students, 9,000 employees, and our Board of Education. Thank you for hosting this forum to provide information to our community. Now, I want to ride off of that question that you asked Dr. Arnold. When we talk about those basic needs and that parent just keeping it real, I don't have a computer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, every student in Columbus City Schools will have a computer by the start of school. Not only will they have a computer, but they'll have a hotspot if they don't currently have internet.
Okay.
And we're going to continue with our grab and go breakfast and lunch sites throughout the summer. And by the start of school, there will be a plan in place so that students will be fed. So the first thing, we can take those and we can answer those questions for parents right here.
Okay.
So, and we'll continue to share that information. Something else that's critical is that school starts on September the 8th. School does not start in August. School starts after Labor Day. And I know there's some people cheering and dancing because parents have always said, how come we can't start after Labor Day? Well, we're starting after Labor Day. And let me tell you why. We're starting after Labor Day so that our teachers and our entire staff, that's 9,000. Mr. DJ King, you talked about our custodians,
Mm-hmm.
our food service workers, our instructional assistants, our amazing teachers. We are taking 10 full days of professional development. So this fall will not look like we looked in the spring.
Right.
We are really preparing ourselves for that. And the decision to go all virtual was really based on guidance that we were getting from our public health officials.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew, it was our hope that we could bring, some students back and do some type of in-person in September. But with over 50,000 students and 9,000 employees, that risk was far too great.
So with you having like the 10 days of professional development, that does allow the teachers to kind of, develop this in-depth curriculum and things like that so how can we assure that, that this curriculum that's going to be rolled out is going to be, I don't want to say beneficial to the kids, but how can we feel that like the students are engaged, and what does that look like in terms of, if I'm a parent with a kindergarten, how do I know that they're getting handwriting skills? Or if I'm a parent of an 11th grader, that's doing algebra 2, and I have no idea what that looks like. What's some of the different things that's in place for the virtual side of things?
Great. And that's a great question, because I mentioned how our teachers our 9,000 staff, they're getting the professional
Mm-hmm.
development. Last month, we started running twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, virtual family academies.
Okay.
And we will continue to run those throughout the school year. And in those academies are the how-to. How do I sign on to Infinite Campus? How do I sign in the parent portal? How do I contact the teacher? More importantly, how do I know my student is learning what they should be learning? So we will be running these every Tuesday and Thursday. And plus, teachers will have their office hours so that parents can reach out to them. Another misstep, or it just happened so fast in the spring, I won't call it a misstep, we weren't able to bring our parents along. Now we have the time, as we're focused on making sure our staff have the professional development they need, making sure families, and we can't forget our students, making sure our students are comfortable with these different learning platforms. Now, I'm not going to paint a picture like it's all going to be rosy.
No, absolutely.
Dr. Honor said it. There will be some missteps, but this is an opportunity for our entire community to lean in. because there's an ecosystem that surrounds our kids. And it's not just school. School is a component. It's not just family. Family is a component. But then there's this community component. And right now, our community, they are leaning in and they are ready.
That's good.
I would agree. You know, I'm gonna go back with the hard questions. And we've talked about this, Alicia. So these forums that you're having for parents, I work, okay, during the day. Are we making sure that they're in the evenings or different times? And then, for the teachers, again, I work during the day. I may not get home till 6 o'clock after I got to get off work at 5, take a bus. Are those teachers going to be accessible at after hour times for those parents? If I get home and I'm trying to figure it out, I'm asking those questions because I know there are people that I know who are going to ask me those questions,
Right.
or are going to be naysayers about the process. And I want to try to give them as much information as we can tonight and next week to ensure people that there is a commitment from this district to make sure that our parents who may be challenged, that we're going to help them walk through it.
Yes, and thank you for that. And I'd be glad to share. So let's start with the family virtual academies that we're doing. Those are in the evening, but even more so than it's in the evening, we record those sessions.
Okay.
And so you can go on the website to review a session. Our last one was we went Facebook Live because there was such a great demand for that. Now, as for teachers' accessibility, teachers will be reaching out and will be accessible for staff. I mean, not for staff, for parents and for their students. So they'll be reaching out. There will be more communication. And there are some things, Stephanie, that we're going to have to build as we go. But I like to share with our families their questions and concerns. Those fuel what needs to be done in the district. So I would welcome them to ask those questions, because if we don't have a framework around it, then that's something we have to go back and do.
Sure, thank you. I just, again, not trying to put anybody on the spot, but we know what those challenges are, and so what I don't want to do is to see people get discouraged because they don't feel like that they don't have access. I have a parent. I have somebody on here talking about, because my child didn't sign on or go to school, that I might get in trouble and I have to go to work. You have to understand these are the pressures that parents are feeling. So, how do we just, again, okay, I got to go to work, but I got a child at home. And I think I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, Alicia, you've been working with groups of people for, in the community on how we can provide opportunities for kids during this time period. So can you talk a little bit about that? I know Hannah's going to talk a little bit about it. My folks are going to talk about what we're doing, but what else is available for parents who have to go to work every day to make sure that their kids are getting some kind of intellectual stimulation during the day?
Yes, thank you for that. So we have been in conversations with our faith-based organizations all around Columbus, the city of Columbus, and not only our faith-based, but also our community and our district partners and our faith-based leaders. And many of them, and I don't have the complete comprehensive list because we're still working on that, but they've said that they will hold, for lack of a better term, drop-in centers where students could actually drop in, and not only they can come in with their device for a workstation, but then there will also be someone there to help them through their assignments if they needed that. So we don't have all of that ironed out yet. And a lot of this, our faith-based leaders have taken on their own to do it. And I'm really, really excited about it. Partners have said, as far as social emotional counseling, as far as tutoring and those type of assistance, that they would also partner with the faith-based organizations. So we will have comprehensive information to be able to share with families. But I want families to know, Stephanie, I may be sitting here saying like, it's going to be okay. Nope, we're going to make
That's right.
But as long as we can provide each other grace, knowing that COVID didn't just happen to the schools, right? COVID
Right.
happened to all of us, and we're trying to figure it out. Yes, it hit some harder than it hit others, but we are a community and we're ready to work together to make this happen.
Mhm.
So I think that's really important piece here tonight is, we do have to give everyone some grace here. This is new. Everything that was pre-COVID no longer exists. This is what I tell my team at the Urban League all the time. We have to look at doing our work differently and better. We just want to ask the questions and do this forum tonight so that our community knows what is going on. And if you do happen to miss this, or if you're talking to someone at home, that you can go online, that you can go to the district and help figure out how we can make sure we get your child in that learning environment during this time period. But I want to switch, if I could, DJ, Mr. King, to Dr. Roberts, because I think it's important that our community has an understanding of what is still going on as it relates to COVID-19 and why the decisions to go virtual really happened, and that this wasn't just something that somebody pulled out of the hat, but there was really a safety issue related to this. So, Dr. Roberts, thank you again for being on. I know you've been going 24/7 for about 4 months now, and but we just appreciate your leadership. And can you talk a little bit about to our community why this was a good decision for the district, and what's still happening with COVID-19 and what we need to do to try to get that curve down again?
Sure. Well, thanks again for having me. And thanks for all you're doing, President Hightower, and the rest of my panelists with me this evening. So, as the Health Commissioner for Columbus Public Health, my job is to protect the health and improve the lives of everyone in our community. And now more than ever, that responsibility keeps me up at night. I can tell you that as the largest county in the state, we also have the largest case count of COVID-19 cases in the state. We lead Cuyahoga County by about 2,000 cases. And then obviously Hamilton County falls third. So it's Franklin, Cuyahoga, and then Hamilton County. So that's concerning. That's very concerning. And I can tell you that from June to July of this year, our case count increased by 220%. 220% more cases just from June to July. And we saw the gradual increase start right around July 1st when people started having gatherings with family and friends celebrating the 4th of July. And people started relaxing some of the measures that we had put in place, whether that be masks, whether that be social distancing, gatherings of 10 or less. That's when we started to see the cases slowly increase. There is this, I think if you've watched any news at all, you know that Dr. Birx and the White House Coronavirus Task Force came up with a list of 11 cities that they said were cities to watch because they were the next surge. They could potentially be the next surge for coronavirus cases. Columbus was on that list. That's not a list that we wanted to be on. Dr. Birx was in town a few weeks ago, and she gave all of us some really stern advice. And she said, you have to put forth some aggressive measures in order to control this so that Ohio doesn't become the next Florida, the next Arizona, and the next Texas. And so, I really commend the work of our leaders, whether it be Governor DeWine or Mayor Ginther, for really saying we've got to do better than what we're doing. I am proud that Columbus was one of the first cities, not the first, but one of the first cities to pass the mask ordinance. And I think we're starting to reap some of those benefits from that. There's also this belief out there that children don't get COVID, or they don't get COVID as much as adults do, or they don't shed the virus as much, and they don't get as sick as adults do. And I would say that the jury's still out on that. So much of that is because since March, really all around the country, we've had our kids at home. So here in the United States, we don't know how much of this virus does circulate among kids. I can tell you when I look at the data right here in Franklin County, and I look at age 0 to 19, for the months of March through June, so that's 4 months, we had 880 cases of COVID-19 of children between the ages of 0 and 19. 880 cases in 4 months. Just for the month of July, just for 1 month, we had over 900 cases from that same age group. Okay, so more cases, shorter period of time. And what happened in July? Our kids started practicing, whether it was sports or whatever athletic event they were in school. They started practicing together. And the largest group we saw were 15 to 19-year-olds. Those were the groups where we saw the most cases, both in March through June as well as July. Okay, so again, those were the groups that were probably doing the sporting activities and where the parents might not be able to have as much control over their behaviors and their activities as you might a younger child. So COVID-19 does exist in our young people. They can spread it. We've seen cases and heard stories around the country, from camps to even some school districts around the country that have opened back up and have seen cases. So the recommendation, and I want to really reiterate, the recommendation that I gave schools in our district or our jurisdiction were a few. First, you should follow the Ohio Department of Health regulations for schools. But there were a few recommendations that I suggested they consider. They were recommendations, they were not mandates. And the first one was, do not bring kids back into the classroom until we in Franklin County see 4 consecutive weeks of a downward trend in cases. Again, we're leading the state in cases. We are red or level 3. We've teetered on the border of being level 4, which is purple. And we've been one of the few counties in the state who has almost been purple. So it's something that we take seriously. The number of cases we have and the stress that we could put on our very robust hospital system. So some of the stories you heard in New York and even in Florida, we don't want to repeat that here with our hospital systems. We've got great hospitals and they're great partners with us, but we don't want to repeat what we've seen in other states. We don't want to repeat that here in Ohio. So I gave some recommendations, and one was to wait to bring the kids back into the classroom until we saw that 4 consecutive weeks of a downward trend in cases. I'm happy to report that for the last few weeks, we're moving in the right direction. We're not at 4 weeks yet, but we're moving in the right direction. So I'm optimistic that if we as a community continue to wear our mask, if we continue to limit our social gatherings, especially keeping them to 10 or less, and if we control some of our other activities, which the state has helped us by closing bars or at least stopping the sale of alcohol at 10 p.m., I am very optimistic that we will reach that goal of 4 consecutive weeks of downward trend, and we'll be able to have some resemblance of normalcy. Granted, even a blended model at school is not our normal, but we'll have some degree of normalcy back here in our community.
I do want to piggyback off of something that you said, Dr. Roberts. When it comes to sports and high school athletes, we all know that sports is a vital part for a reason why a lot of these kids go to school. Yeah. So what do you think happens? I mean, I guess any of you guys can. What do you think happens if we remove sports from these kids? What is their motivation to go to school?
So I will speak about the safety of sports, and I will let the others, the experts on education, talk about that. But, the challenge we have with sports is you're in close proximity. Because you are having physical exertion, you are exempt from wearing a mask. And I really don't know if I would recommend someone who is doing strenuous athletic activities like playing basketball or playing football to wear a mask. But by doing so, you can easily spread the virus from one person to another. We've seen that. I mean, look at the NBA and what they're doing. They're in a bubble. So far, so good. But compare that to the baseball players. It's a totally different thing. They're each going home to their own personal homes every night. They're doing their own personal social activities, whatever that might be, where they could be exposed. And then they're bringing that back to the team and to their teammates. And so we have to think about that same thing for our athletes. Yes, the physical activity of the sport is good. The teamwork mentality is good. But if it puts them, and most importantly, their family at risk for this infection, if they're going home to grandma who has diabetes and hypertension, and she gets COVID-19, and then she needs to be hospitalized, and then worse, she might be on a vent, and unfortunately she could lose her life, is playing that football game worth it? You know, and that's what I ask people all the time is whatever extracurricular activities you're doing, whether you're a child or an adult, whatever you choose to do, at the end of the day, can you ask yourself if it was worth getting COVID over? And that's what we all have to ask. And it's a hard question to ask if you've never had COVID-19 because you don't know how it feels. But if you hear some of the stories from people who have, it can be a very miserable experience.
Sure. Thank you for that. I appreciate that, Dr. Ms. Gillison or Dr. Arnold, you guys want to add any of that? Because I think I'm speaking from a coach's standpoint too. I know that even during the regular school year, like, you know what I'm saying, if most of my athletes are eligible during their athletic season. And then after that, you just hoping to reel them in, you know? So I'm just curious on that.
I second what Dr. Roberts shared. But if we want our lives to return to some type of normalcy, then everyone, let's double down and do what we are supposed to do. Let's wear our masks. Let's keep our gatherings small. Let's do the social distancing. Then hopefully we can be back to normal. But right now, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it?
Right. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Roberts, Ms. Gillison, Ms. Arnold, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for a lot of very, very wonderful insight on a lot of different topics. I think that our guests, our viewers online would appreciate that. And just the work that you all are doing just to help us, you know, get to some sense of normalcy. Because it's definitely not easy. It's definitely not easy, but you all are doing some amazing things to help us get there. So we definitely appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, no problem. So we're going to switch over here soon to a second panel. And our second panel that we have coming up, we'll call this Real or Virtual, what it means to your family. So this panel will include Ms. Melinda Carter. She is the Vice President, Chief of Programming and Strategy at the Columbus Urban League. How are you?
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good.
DJ Mr. King.
How you doing? We also have Columbus City Councilwoman Miss Elizabeth Brown joining us.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good.
Good. Glad you can join us. And then we have Executive Director and CEO of KIP Columbus, Miss Hannah Powell, joining us as well.
Good evening.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Good to see you.
You as well. Thanks for joining us. And then, of course, my sidekick, Ms. Hightower, she's back right there.
Yes, Dr. DJ, Mr. King. And see, this is what happens when you live in the hood and broadband is not what it's supposed to be. And see, mine went out just like that. So I'm going to depend on Councilmember Brown to come on into the urban core and make sure this broadband is working the way it's supposed to. So how about that? Hey, I just want to mention real quick in the chat before I went off, we had someone, Miss Carol Phillips Haynes, wants families to know that Kitty Academy is providing small learning labs and pandemic pods to support Columbus City school students. And there's free breakfast, lunch, snack, and dinner. So thank you, Miss Phillips Haynes, for bringing that to our attention. Really appreciate you on that. So, you know what, let's start with, Councilmember Brown. I think it's, you've been really paying attention to the summer programs, learning opportunities for kids this summer. Tell us, your thoughts on what the city's what they're doing. And as we look at moving into the school year and not really having the proper or the structure that our kids are used to, what are some of your thoughts on how the city is helping and what parents should know?
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me here to talk about this subject, which is just so critically important. It matters to so many families across our city. When we were entering the summer, Ms. Hightower, we were on the radio together talking about the upcoming programs that our Recreation and Parks department was going to put on, because we really believed that we had to have some kind of safe programming for kids who had been out of school for that whole quarter. Well, here we are again. And I know that your last segment kind of went into detail about why that is. So our summer programming, we put it together knowing that it could provide a safe place for kids, but knowing that there were health considerations. And we developed the summer programming in concert with Columbus Public Health and under the guidance of Dr. Roberts. We had numerous new safety precautions put in place, like limitations on participants, like the size of the different classrooms. Mask wearing guidelines were implemented, an increased focus on hand washing and social distancing. And in light of those changes, we still wanted to provide, we couldn't do wrestling camp, right? Like there are some camps that couldn't happen under those safety guidelines. But not only do we do that at our recreation centers, we also made $2 million in grants available for Columbus nonprofit organizations to be able to offer their programs that cost a lot more money to do these programs safely for kids when you're talking about lower capacity. I'm going into all that because I want to note that, going into the summer, we knew our numbers would be down. We knew we couldn't serve as many kids with these capacity guidelines. But most programs were at about 50 to 70% capacity this summer. So I will say we're not heartened to hear that because we want to serve as many kids as possible. But I think it's pretty clear parents have mixed feelings about sending their kids into group environments right now. And I know that the schools heard that on their surveys they did with parents. And a silver lining that our Recreation and Parks Department wanted me to note is that there were actually more opportunities for kids to experience direct mentoring and interactions because we were working in smaller groups. So that's something to consider. And this experience is going to be new for all of us going into the school year, but we are at the city trying to understand, can we take this model from the summer and do more to provide for kids, not just the technical assistance that they need to do remote learning, but to provide some kind of environment that's safe, that gives them nutrition, and that gives them the kind of social learning kids need in their lives. We don't just send kids to school to learn from books. We also send kids to school to learn from each other.
So Councilmember Brown, I hear what you're saying. How soon do you think you all might, or Recreation and Parks might have a formula for some of the program offerings that they may want to expand into the fall? I'm glad that, Alicia mentioned we're September 8th. So we got a little bit of time. We got about a month, but we know that those 4 weeks will go by really fast. Do you think there could be some opportunities from the Recreation and Parks Department to have open pods or learning labs for kids? Have you guys been thinking about that?
We have been thinking about that, and I hope to be able to share with you some opportunities soon. But we've got to be able to pay for those opportunities. As I said, all of this is way more expensive, and we also have to make sure it works for families and it works for our health department. The environment in which we designed our Recreation and Parks programming in June was actually an environment where rates were going down. And as Dr. Roberts has talked about, that's not the public health landscape right now. Rates are, our positivity rate is getting dangerously high, and we're one of the highest counties in the state for infection rate. So the environment that we're working in is different, and that's why I just don't know what it is we're going to be able to do, whether it's through us or whether it's through city partners, to help provide more options for families to have in-person care.
Well, I just thought it was important for you to come on today just to let our families know that, number one, DJ Mr. King, that there were real programs there for the summer. And, this is where I think, as Councilmember Brown talked about, nobody knows what to do. Do I send my kids? Do I not send my kids? Everybody's challenged on that. But I just wanted folks to know that the city did implement and put some things in place, and they worked with us, and I'm going to, let you tee this up with Melinda, DJ Mr. King, but we know that the city's continuing to think about it. And so thank you, Councilmember Brown, for your continued leadership and helping to, lead the cause towards making sure that our young people and our children have an opportunity during this unprecedented time to not only learn, but to also to stay active and stay engaged and be able to socialize. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you.
And piggybacking off of just learning, I want to ask, transition to Hannah, and over at KIP. So you have, with you guys over there, how are you preparing your parents in terms of the adjustments that they will have to make? Like much like we asked the last group in terms of technology and things of that nature. But what other things and additional resources are you providing to your family? Like if I'm a parent of a first grader, do I still go back? Do I still do the intensive back to school shopping? Do I need school supplies? Or these things being provided for me to complete some of the tasks that may be needed virtually, or is everything just online and I'm not expected to have paper or pen or anything like that at home? So what's some of the things that KIP has in place?
Well, thanks for the question. Good to be on tonight with everyone. These are incredibly difficult times, as has been shared at numerous times just in this conversation tonight. So for our families, I mean, we've made a commitment that we would communicate early and often. I'm sitting in the same office I'm in right now when I got the notice that schools, there was a mandatory closure in that mid-March. And, there's a lot of information coming quickly. It changes often, as Councilmember Brown was just talking about the rates in our community and how that shifts. And so, we made a commitment that we would communicate early and often and that we would be in this together. And so we have surveyed and focus groups and made calls continuously throughout this process to learn, what is needed, how we can best support. If we can't best support, how can we connect with people in the community who can. And so a few things that were also echoed in the last segment. I mean, we've distributed over 250,000 meals. For those who aren't aware of what KIP is, we're a set of schools in the Northeast community with over 2,000 students, kindergarten through 12th grade. And as we prepare for this upcoming school year, similar commitments that every student will receive a computer and have internet access. We're committed to that. We were able to distribute computers one-to-one to all of our students this past spring. But as Alicia said, this will look very different. Some other things specifically to your question around resources and supplies, we're working on, one, if students are able to come back, KIP is providing all of those supplies. They're going to be working to do that, and we'll have individual supplies boxes as an example for every child. But even in the remote space, as we've made a determination to go for the first 6 weeks remote only, after consultation with Dr. Roberts as well, we are going to be creating curriculum boxes depending on the grades, what all that would consist of. But as you mentioned, whether that's paper and pencils or books or manipulatives for math and project-based learning for science and some other, working to make sure that that's available in partnership with the families too.
So Hannah, are you going to be able to, open the school at all, your building, for after school or during school and keep safety guidelines in place? Are you still going to open your campus like some of the churches and whatever will have the ability to host our children?
Yeah, I mean, just as Councilmember Brown was talking about, what they're trying to figure out at the city, what can be possible, we're trying to do the same. That, we surveyed our families and opened up an opportunity for them to enroll in KIP at Home, which is KIP's online learning model for the first semester through August through December. And we had over 60% of our families choose that. And so with the 40% that did not enroll in that option, we are committed to bringing every child back as often and as safely as possible that we possibly can. And so we are actively exploring ways that even though we're closed for a period of time, we may remain open in some way through partnerships. For example, the YMCA operates an early learning center on our campus. Now, they've been operating a child care center. It was a pandemic child care center. Now it's a child care center since the spring. And so, we're actively working with partners, and we start on August 24th. So we don't have quite as much time, but to create a safe space where students are able to come. We just did a survey with our families to find out what they need, transportation needs, and, again, how we can layer on partnerships to support programming, even in the midst of schools being closed. And I should add too, we are set up already to welcome our kids back. There's 6 feet social distancing reflected in every corner of our facilities. And so we are ready and excited for when we can pivot back to in-person learning and have that go ahead from that recommendation. But again, in the meantime, we'll be actively working on
what does that look like for and this was probably a question that that some of our educators may have that's listening in terms of like the virtual teaching model. If I'm a teacher, do I have access to my classroom, and am I teaching from my classroom, or am I teaching from my dining room table, or am I teaching from the park? Like, what does that look like? Because while your schools are still open, is that an avenue that you guys have explored at KIPP?
Yeah, and this is all happening very fast, as we all know. So we just made this, decision on Thursday after consultation with Dr. Roberts and others. And so today's only Monday, but we hope to be able to share more information with our staff this week. And part of that will include an opportunity to hopefully be able to come back. Just as you said, where am I teaching from? How are we doing that? That we could open up spaces on our campus and in our schools for teachers to come and have access to different tools and resources that they may need or want during that time. Just as much as we're trying to figure out how to open that up to the 40% of families that chose an in-person KIPP on campus option. Want to be sure that we're supporting our teachers and staff to be able to do that too.
Mm-hmm.
So Melinda Carter is vice president at the Columbus Urban League, and we've had the privilege this summer of creating remote learning opportunities, project-based programming for young people. Melinda, you want to talk a little bit about that? Because one of the things that I hope that that can come out of this is that as parents who may say, I don't like this remote learning idea, there are some really good examples of remote learning that works, and we can keep your kids engaged. And we've had parents say, thank you so much for this program this summer. So can you talk a little bit about what the young people have done? Because I think this could also be information that our Councilwoman Brown might want to take back to her colleagues, but also for our parents and families out there. These are your taxpayer dollars. And so we want to hear from you. So can you talk a little bit about what we've been doing this summer and how remote learning can work if you apply yourself to it?
We are very happy with I think everyone didn't know what was expecting, but didn't know what the participation would be like, as Councilmember Brown said. But we've had great participation in our programs thus far, which surprised me, quite frankly. But we have three programs, all virtual, that we're running for the summer. We have Learn to Earn, which is funded by the county. We also have We Earn programs. So the children earn, of course, the participants earn a salary for as they participate in the program, but they're all virtual. We have platforms that they're able to get on and get information regarding. We did robotics. One of our classes deal with robotics, and they go from beginning to end with respect to building a robot and building all of that. The Learn to Earn is STEAM, Young Geniuses STEAM as well. So we talk about all sorts of educational issues with respect to what they may have missed or what they can do. We have a curriculum designed to make sure they move through those things and in a way that's engaging, and so they're not turning us off. Because one of the things, as President Hightower said, we're all, everything's about COVID now, and people's families have changed. The family stability has changed in terms of, you got a little sister you're watching, you were on programs before, and there was no problem. Now you got all these other responsibilities, and the family is in flux, good and bad. I mean, even myself, I understand that. So, but our programs have been working really well. Again, we have about 200 youth total, 100 youth in our Learn to Earn program. We have 30 youth in our Young Genius program, and about 40 youth in our VLOG. Now, the VLOG program is very, very exciting, and also our participation has been great. Our children are building a video YouTube video on YouTube and experiencing their emotions and things that they dealt with during this COVID crisis. So we have been very engaged. They have worked. We've had some minor touches in that when we did our book bags, we delivered them. We did checks, we delivered them, just because we want some of that. And of course, they can see the teacher, but also just understanding, what does your family need and where are you now? And we want to be very transparent in that this is a safe place. And we recognize, there's a lot of we want to mitigate some of the impact of them not being socialized, not being educated as they normally would have. So our programs have worked very well. Again, 3 programs, we're serving almost 400 students total. Another offer for a program, I don't know if I'm living right or whatever, but it's a youth entrepreneurship program that the county wants us to do. So hopefully we'll be launching that. We've already launched it with the water bottle program. The county asked us to go out and look at the children that are selling water bottles, and from that has spurred the opportunity to create an entrepreneurship program. So I'll talk with President Hightower, but we have a number of offerings for students that are exciting. Our staff is very engaged. We've been in this business for a while, and they feel our families are very comfortable. I appreciate Hannah's comment. I have a Kipster, and I was one of the 40% that was sitting Malcolm back. I appreciate that. But our program is very intentional about what our focus is, and that is to educate our children in a way that's safe, understanding their issues. We understand there's financial issues, there may be hunger, there may be safety issues. We want them to know that we are a safe haven, even virtually. So if you want to reach out to us, you can. But our programs that have been funded by the city are great. They're going very well, as well as the county and as well as VLOG, and hopefully the business entrepreneurship program, which I'll be up all night writing the rest of that program. But we've already started.
Don't try to make it. Don't make people think that I work you like you.
All night long. I'm sure we'll go to sleep.
So I appreciate that.
But
I want to
thank
ask.
you.
I want to ask a question to I guess the entire panel. We're talking about this and the whole COVID, the whole virtual, the whole new model of learning as something that we've never obviously experienced. But in the sense of this, do any of you think that this may be almost the new norm, or this may be the way education is shifting, because you have so much individualized learning, individualized teaching, that we talk about the students that may struggle, but we also have a handful of students who struggle in class that may benefit from this. So do you think that this may be a new model, whether it's this blended type situation where parents can choose even when it's safe to say, hey, you know what, my kid succeeded with this model and I don't want to send them back. Will Columbus City or will KIPP Columbus offer this, virtual model, even when it's safe to go back? So do you think that these times are like the new norm?
I mean, I'm glad to jump in there. I think, it's hard to even know what is going to happen next week. So futuristic thinking is, hard but necessary. And I do think, it gives us an opportunity to reimagine schools, no doubt. And we saying to do that through a deeper lens of anti-racism, love, action, joy, and community. And, that schools are not operating as isolated institutions, but that we are part of the community. Stephanie and I have talked about, there's a Nelson Mandela quote, there's no keener revelation of a society soul than the way in which it treats its children. And this is an opportunity to what are we going to do for our children and our families in partnership with each other? And that through that partnership with families, with community, how can we reimagine this? And I don't know exactly what that will take as far as what courses are offered or how they're offered, but I think, what we're doing to support in partnership as a community, our community's children. Doesn't matter the type of school they go to or where they hit, but what are they getting, and how are we doing that in partnership with our families and our community really matters. So I think there is the last segment someone talked about silver lining. Most certainly this gives us an opportunity to reimagine schools and spaces, and I hope that we can do that we will, people talking, it's not good to go. What is the normal? We don't want to go back to that.
We don't know what that is.
Yeah.
And in truth, there's some things we weren't doing well. And I think this may give us an opportunity to reset. Everybody tries to do their best, but I know from our programming at the Urban League. I think it was great programming before, but I think it's gotten better because time is of the essence, and the sense of urgency is now. So I think we'll get better, and we'll hear them and see them. And so, I mean, it's a terrible time. This pandemic impacts us all kinds of ways, but learning never stops. And so I just think we'll be forced to find new ways that'll work. And so I am pleased to be with these leaders that are talking about those things. I'm glad we're being allowed to be a part of it. And I think that our partnership with everyone in doing that and making that happen for our children, particularly those children that are marginalized, I'm very excited about the future in that respect.
Well, I think what, Alicia talked, I'm sorry, go ahead, Councilmember Brown.
I think that from the city's perspective, we don't run the schools, so I couldn't say how much I know they've told me that the digital curriculum is an important part of a 21st century education, so I know that. But I also think from the city's perspective, we have to think about how this crisis, that the world is changing overall, not just education. I forget how you phrased it, DJ Mr. King, but I think that you hit the nail on the head when we're talking about globally how we need to make sure families have access to online resources. Families have access to online medical care when they need it. When it's a barrier to get somewhere to see a doctor, you should be able to have a telehealth appointment. And we don't want your internet connection to be a barrier, right? So there are some of these real details of 21st century life that this pandemic is putting into high relief. It's past time to solve the problems with digital connection in homes across our city. The fiber is there. It is. The fiber is there. We need long-term sustainable solutions for connecting people.
And Councilmember Brown, that's exactly where I was going. I think, Hannah, you said it, and Melinda, we have to reimagine. And, DJ, Mr. King, you've said the same thing. It's, how do we provide those resources? This is really about what social justice reform is all about. It's about how do we level the playing field and make sure that there is equity in our education. And I agree, Melinda, this is our time to reset everything about, what we do, not only locally, nationally, but globally. And if we can, and I want to mention again, the Columbus Foundation just started a $500,000 fund for technology.
Yeah, really, I like
broadband.
that.
I know Doug Quinlan's gonna call me tonight and say, "Are you after you guys behind the but just that seed money for us to start leveling the playing field for Black and brown children in urban and under-resourced families, it's really important, and that's how we reimagine this new learning style that is really upon us, and we really don't have a choice at this point but to figure out how to make it work. So I appreciate everyone on here tonight, DJ Mr. King, just to begin to have the conversation about education in Columbus and having Columbus City Schools, which is the largest district, but they're not the only district. We have Whitehall, we have Reynoldsburg, we have Gahanna, where we have a lot of Black and brown and under-resourced kids there as well. And, and I appreciate, Hannah comes to the table, KIPP, being an alternative school for our children, but we know that there's a large percentage of Black and brown children in there and what they're doing. So hopefully our listening audience tonight will see that and understand that no one has all the answers yet, right? And we do need to give people grace, our elected officials, our educators, our education leaders. But I think the biggest thing we wanted to communicate tonight was that people are working on it. And we know it's a really short window, but folks are working on it. And we appreciate being a part of the city's work and the county's work and other private sectors work, to make this thing happen.
But I have before we wrap up, I do have one more question. This can go to Hannah because you're in the education spectrum of it. If what do I do if I'm a parent of a student on an IEP or with special education needs? What do I do during these times, and how can I make sure I'm still getting all the accommodations, the modifications, and everything that I need in order, whether it's the academic side IEP, what if I'm on a behavior IEP, what if I'm special needs? How do I make sure that that population is being served as well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to the question, it's an individualized program. You need to make sure that, you know, you're talking with your school and that school and getting feedback and getting clarity on how that will operate in a virtual space. It's a much longer question. There's a number of things that can happen but the bottom line is they should be still receiving services at this time. And so whether that's speech, OT, different, but it's unique based on the student and the circumstances, but needing to work, you know, in partnership to make sure that those services are, you know, are still delivered. There may be modifications and adjustments given the space, but it's really unique to that student and what can be done. But we have to stay in communication with each other, and a family most certainly doing that with their school to understand how that will translate given the virtual space and what, you know, and advocate for that.
Okay. Thank you for that. Ladies, thank you. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Very
Thank
great
you.
information.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You know, I think to wrap up for me, it's a matter of DJ, you know, Mr. King, people need to remember that, you know, our public school system, they pay the taxes.
Mhm.
They pay the teacher salaries. They pay the superintendent salaries. Please take advantage of what they have to offer. And if you cannot get questions, you have a right to call, and you have a right to start holding people accountable. And I think that's the important thing that I think we should take away from this conversation tonight as well.
You know, the biggest thing that I took away from all of it today is the fact that I know it seems very cliche and that we keep saying this, but we really are truly in this all together. And it's going to really take an entire community, an entire village, an entire tribe to make sure that kids are successful during this time. So I think that if you're a parent and you have 2 or 3 kids that are doing well in it, you know what I'm saying, mentor another parent or take another kid in, like, you know what I'm saying, and help them throughout that time. If it's somewhere where you're struggling at, you know what I'm saying, lean on somebody like that they were saying in the first segment. Like, we have to lean on each other in order for this to be successful, because again, we've never been through this, but we can get through it. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I hope, you know, for everyone that is on tonight and you're listening, we're going to be back again next week, same time. And hopefully, as the school districts continue to develop those different programs and options, we're going to be able to update you next week with some more information about education in Columbus, Ohio during this pandemic, and how we can make sure that our children have the proper tools that they need and opportunities to become successful young adults.
Yeah, and we're going to make sure next week. I know a lot of people was curious about like the preschool segment part of it, so we'll make sure we touch on that, and then also like where and how to secure food as well if your family needs that. So those will be some of the topics. But Ms. Hightower, it's always great connecting with you. You're doing some amazing things here. You know, we always appreciate you and everything you do here in Columbus.
Thank you, DJ, Mr. King. And I just like having, you know, a young man like you with that energy side by side, making these kinds of opportunities work. So thank you for your work and your leadership as well.
No problem. No problem. So we will definitely tap in with you guys next week, next Monday, same time, right here on whatever you watch this on Facebook. Some of you guys tuned in at mycolumbuspower.com, mymagic.com, all that. So we're everywhere. Wherever you want to watch us, tap in next week. Thank you, Ms. Hightower.
Thank you.